Hi, I'm Tim Ogden, president of the Bardet-Biedl Syndrome Foundation, and welcome to today's session. When parents learn about a child's vision loss, it's heartbreaking and disorienting. How will their child learn to cope with low or no vision? How will they get along in school and in life? Fortunately, there are highly trained professionals called teachers of the visually impaired, or TVIs, who are there to help. Still, many families are unclear on what a TVI does or what services, technologies, and skills a blind person needs, and how and when they should be taught those skills. Today's session is all about those questions. We'll hear from 3 TVIs who work with BBS kids, one who's a mom to 2 BBS young men. We hope you learned some valuable information. Don't hesitate to follow up with the foundation if you have more questions.
Hello, my name is Ellie DeLucia. I am a junior at Kutztown University, which is in Pennsylvania. I am a visual impairment birth to 21 major, which is basically a special education major with a concentration in visual impairment. And I'm a Spanish minor. And it is a pleasure to be presenting to you today at the BBS virtual conference. And I am hoping that today I'm able to share some of my knowledge regarding the role of a teacher of the visually impaired, or a TVI, for an individual who has Bardet-Biedl syndrome. So let's get started. All right, so visual impairment as it relates to Bardet-Biedl syndrome, basically one of the main characteristics of BBS is this retinal degeneration or cone rod dystrophy, which basically in simpler terms is a visual impairment caused by degeneration of cells in the retina of the eye. So basically in the eye, light comes in and hits the back of the eye, which is considered the retina. And the retina is responsible for turning that visual input from light and passing it along the optic nerve to the brain, which turns visual information into pictures that we see. And when there's degeneration of the retina, those images are not correct, or they're not transferred to the brain properly. Basically, the specific cells are these cone and rod cells, and that's what's degenerating in the retina. And the cones specifically are responsible for our ability to see color, contrast, and clarity. So fine detail, the difference between colors. And then the rods are responsible for our peripheral vision, which is the vision surrounding our central vision. So when you look straight ahead, what you're able to see surrounding what's straight ahead of you is your peripheral. So that's impacted. And then the rods are also responsible for your ability to see at night and in low light situations. So in rooms that are dimly lit, that may be challenging when there's dystrophy of those rod cells. So additional things to know about the nature of this visual impairment is that it is progressive vision loss, which means that there's increased impairment of vision over time. And so one of the big goals of a teacher of the visually impaired, TVI, is to be proactive in providing students with BBS with the skills and resources they need, so that when that vision loss starts occurring, they're prepared ahead of time. And it doesn't come on suddenly and then they don't know what to do, how to succeed in school or life beyond school. Additionally, there may be decreased visual acuity, which is the sharpness and clarity of detail, which can greatly impact one's ability to read normal size font, see things far away in good clarity. Poor color vision or color discrimination. So the ability to distinguish maybe between different colors or all colors in general. It varies from individual to individual. Again, that night blindness because of poor ability to see at night. And in addition, there are blind spots, which tend to be called scotomas. And those form in the peripheral vision, that is the surrounding vision around your central vision, which is, again, what you see when you look straight ahead. And over time, as those scotomas increase, you almost have this tunnel vision effect, which is not necessarily seeing complete blackness around you, but there's a loss of clarity in the peripheral field. And that's what they refer to as tunnel vision. And ultimately, over time, this will result in legal blindness, which is actually what I am. I am legally blind. And we'll go on to the next slide to hear more about that. So legal blindness. So when you think of blindness, it's not necessarily a straightforward, you either see perfectly or you see nothing at all. There are different, it's a spectrum. There are different degrees of vision loss and blindness. So low vision is basically a visual acuity of 20/70 to 2200. Don't get too caught up in the numbers. That can be a little challenging to understand, but I'm sure everyone is familiar with hearing about 20/20 vision. That is the typical perfect visual acuity. And if you have a vision of 20/70, what someone with 20/20 vision can see from 70 feet away, a person with 20/70 vision has to be 20 feet away from that. So they have to be closer. But again, that's just the numerical breakdown, not something to be too caught up in. But then legal blindness, the official definition for legal blindness is a visual acuity of 20/200. So what someone with 20/20 vision can see from 200 feet away, a person who is legally blind has to be 20 feet away to see that object. And again, that is not perfect. That's just the general idea. Additionally, it is a visual field of 20 degrees or less in the better seeing eye. And for both of these, it is after best correction. So after glasses are tried, if the visual acuity or visual field is still impaired to this degree, it is considered legal blindness. And then total blindness is what they consider to be little to no light perception of all, which is the stereotypical blindness. But just because someone is blind or legally blind, it does not mean that they only see blackness. And more information about the vision impairment caused by Bardet-Biedl syndrome. There is currently no cure, but typically clinical treatment or doctor treatment would be ongoing evaluation by an ophthalmologist who will likely assess the person's visual acuity, so their ability to see visual details, their visual fields. So what can they see out of the left, right, upper, and lower fields of vision while staring straight ahead? Their color identification and discrimination. So can they see colors? And then can they distinguish them from one another? Can they identify colors correctly? As well as prescribing optical devices, such as glasses or other types of magnifiers. Believe it or not, you need to have the A-OK from an ophthalmologist or another specialist like an optometrist to say you are allowed to have the student use this in school. It is safe for them, and that is what they would be responsible for. So basically the role of a TVI for students with BBS. So the teacher of the visually impaired is basically a teacher focused on students with visual impairments. They can be a teacher at a school for the blind, where they might teach a class in science, and all the students in that class have visual impairments. But most of the time, a TVI, without any additional certifications, is going to do one-on-one consultation with a student who they may pull out for a certain period of time, and they would provide individualized instruction to that student based on their level of need. And so a teacher of the visually impaired has at least a bachelor's degree in education or special education, often a master's degree as well. And they have some kind of specific certification in visual impairment education. So I know teachers of the visually impaired who have education degrees, and then maybe they took an 18-month course in visual impairment to get their TVI certification. Or for me, I am getting my undergraduate degree in visual impairment education, which is very unique. And I was fortunate to discover that at Kutztown University. And basically the goal for TVI is to level the playing field for students with visual impairments by providing the appropriate materials and instruction that will enable equal access to the general education curriculum, which is also in addition oftentimes to a special education curriculum and what is referred to as the expanded core curriculum, which I will touch upon in further slides along the way. And this goal of leveling that playing field and providing access to the curriculum is accomplished through ongoing assessment of the student's vision, which is mainly their functional vision, which is basically you can have two individuals with 2200 visual acuity, both legally blind, but they may use their vision differently. One may seem more functional with their vision loss than the other. And so it's important to not just focus on those numbers or make assumptions based on the results of a visual acuity test, but to really test different activities and functional tasks to see what that student is able to do with the remaining vision that they have. And that way you can target their needs as well. So the functional vision and learning media assessment would be conducted by the teacher of the visually impaired. And basically it would be a bunch of different visual tasks that test visual motor skills, visual perception, the different visual fields, behavior of the eye, throughout a bunch of different matching tasks or catching a ball, making contact with other objects, sorting. So we try to make these activities fun to try and see what is this individual's vision enabling them to do without difficulty, or where is the need visually. And in addition, the learning media portion of that assessment is focused on what kind of materials are most appropriate for the student in the classroom. Will they be a large font reader? Do they learn well visually? Or are they more of a textual learner? Will Braille benefit them more? Textual graphics that they can feel rather than see? And in the same way, auditory. Are they really good at listening? Are they able to accomplish tasks more efficiently when they can hear rather than having to look or read in Braille? So that kind of assessment will help us better determine the most appropriate learning media that will enable them to be successful. And throughout the school year, we conduct formal and informal assessments and observations and make notes, or we make markings on different reading and writing assessments to conduct progress monitoring that will help us accumulate the data necessary to support the claims that we make regarding how the student is doing. Are they making progress? Does something need to change? And are we taking the most efficient approach to helping the student succeed in the classroom with their vision loss? And that goes a lot into what's necessary for the individualized education plan, also known as the IEP. And that data is very important, and we will discuss that more as well in future slides. So additionally, the teacher of the visually impaired provides that individualized instruction because every student is different. Every visual impairment, even with the same visual acuity numbers, is different. And we want to take an approach and provide instruction that best meets that individual's needs. So we focus a lot on that during our oftentimes pull-out sessions that we do with the students and when consulting with the student, the family, and the teachers. And so those consultations are very important. We want feedback. We want to know what is working, what isn't. And it is important that that feedback is obtained from all different teachers, including physical education, music, art, as well as the core teachers of math, science, social studies, and English. We really want that feedback, and we want to know what's working at home, what the parents are seeing, or what the parents' concerns are, and we want to hear from the student, if able, what seems to work for them and what does not. So collaboration with the teachers, students, and families, and consulting with that student on a basis that is determined based on their IEP. And then further, we help to determine and create the accommodations and adaptations needed so that they are successful when receiving that educational instruction. Loss of sight is never a loss of vision. And do not be closed-minded, because that is what causes restrictions the most, is when we are not open to trying new things. And support from families and teachers goes such a long way for these students. So that is basically it. And I would just like to say thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you during this conference. It has been a pleasure, and I believe you will be provided with my contact information should you have any questions or need any further clarification. Again, I am an upcoming junior at Kutztown University. I am 20 years old, and so I'm still very early in my field, but I am someone who is also legally blind. I've been legally blind since I was 3, and so the journey of visual impairment is truly mine as well. And I'm happy to provide any further information as it is needed. So thank you once again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and the rest of the summer. So thank you.
Hello, my name's Krista, and I am mother of 2 sons with Bardet-Biedl syndrome, ages 19 and 15. In addition, I am a teacher of students with visual impairments, or TVI as we're more commonly known, and I'm currently employed here where I live in Washington State. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about advocacy and the role that parents and TVIs play in maximizing the supports our students need to be successful in their general and special educational programming in school. As we get started, I think it's probably safe to assume that for many, if not most of us, the prospect of our children enduring vision loss was one of the more overwhelming and, at least for me, frightening aspects of the BBS diagnosis, because I know I was literally starting from scratch with zero knowledge of what it's like to be blind, let alone how to raise a child going blind, and the responsibility of teaching them the skills they would need to live their life with a visual impairment. With BBS, it's a rather broad spectrum, as many of our kiddos can see all right when they're young. Some of our children's acuity can be corrected with glasses for a time, while we're forced to internally process the fact that at some point the glasses won't be enough anymore. And that is a huge, heartbreaking pill for parents to swallow, on top of all of the other implications BBS has on our children's bodies. As I mentioned earlier, I became a TVI in 2010. So why did I do it? Well, First and foremost, it was for very selfish reasons, and that was to educate myself about the services and supports I knew I would need to be advocating for my boys and their future. With that, I was able to learn about how the eye functions and to have a better understanding of retinal degeneration. I learned about blindness skills and how to teach alternative methods to visual access. I learned about the IEP process and about special education law. I was introduced to various resources and agencies related to living with vision loss. And of course, I learned the Braille code. But I think the most important reason I chose to become a TVI was because I really liked the thought of being able to share my knowledge with other parents on a level that most educators simply can't. I develop a rapport with parents. When I tell them I have two sons with a retinal degenerative disease, there is almost an instant connection because they know I get them. I didn't just read about students like their child from a textbook. I can relate to them on a very personal level. No one understands the initial shock of learning that your child is or will become blind, the search for services, the medical appointments, the complete rescaffolding of how you envisioned your parenting journey would be. I have been there, done that, and I have made some absolutely wonderful friendships in my job as a TVI. Okay, moving forward. Let's discuss the basics of the TVI's role and how parents can work together with not just the TVI, but the entire educational team to ensure our children are receiving the instruction, accommodations, and supports that they need to be successful in their schools and communities. Teachers of the visually impaired are educators who have been specifically trained to work with students with low vision or blindness, and depending on the state that they are in, they are licensed, certified, or perhaps obtain an endorsement in the specialized field. They're typically employed by school districts or state agencies such as Residential Schools for the Blind or the state's Early Intervention Program. They provide services to students from birth through age 21. And service delivery models vary widely. Itinerant teachers travel from school to school across districts, counties, and even states to serve the students at their neighborhood schools. And some districts have magnet schools in which their students who receive vision services attend the same school. And students typically receive direct instruction by a TVI in so many areas, too long to list here, but commonly Braille, assistive technology, and other areas of the expanded core curriculum. And consultative services are also important because this is where the TVI collaborates with other members of the student's IEP team to ensure that supports are in place. Another service provider that is commonly part of the educational team for students with visual impairments is the orientation and mobility specialist. Many TVIs become dually certified in this, but not all of us. O&M instructors, as they're known, teach our children concepts about the body and space, use of tactile and auditory cues in their environment, how to use a white cane, and independent travel skills. An important consideration to remember is that general educators and even many special ed teachers will likely have had limited or even no previous experience working with blind students. This is through no fault of their own because blindness is a low incidence disability and they just may have not had a blind student in their classes prior to our children. This is why TVIs are so important as they have continued beyond generalized special education and became highly specialized in teaching students with visual and multiple impairments. Gen Ed teachers may have concerns when learning they'll have a visually impaired student in their class. They may worry they can't meet their needs since they've not received any formal prior training in teaching blind students. A flexible, compassionate teacher will be open to learning how they can most effectively create a learning environment that is both welcoming and inclusive of the visually impaired student, and will work closely with the TVI to make this happen. Most of you know this by now, or you will learn at some point, that the TVI is or will likely be the quintessential member of your child's educational team. Many of our children have additional qualifying disabilities and receive other services such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, or physical therapy, to name a few. Your child's TBI is often extremely central to the team and should be the oil that keeps the machine running smoothly. The TBI must maintain constant communication with the other service providers because they may not have a lot of experience working with blind students. Here is an example of the many relationships I've developed and maintained throughout the school year to ensure that my third grader low vision student is successful. And there are so many that I hope the writing isn't too small here on the screen. But we have our classroom teacher going around the circle, instructional assistant or paraprofessional, brailleist, case manager, front office staff, administration, that's the principal, vice principal, counselor, tech support, media center specialist or librarian, occupational therapist, speech therapist, physical therapist, PE, music, art teachers, parents, of course, janitorial staff. That's a lot of people. I share this with you because although collaboration occurs between the service providers who work with your child, the TBI is typically the one professional whose knowledge is continually sought by all other team members throughout the year for guidance in how the child's visual impairment impacts their specific area of instruction. And I will add that if I don't hear from a member of the team, it is my duty to reach out to them and make sure that they understand the child's visual impairment and its impact on their functional vision. There is an acronym I like to share with parents of my students that I call PACE, and I often remind them to pace themselves. And as you can see here are the 4 words: participate, advocate, cultivate, and educate. It's really important to make sure that your child's educational team knows that you are genuinely invested in the services your child is receiving. Learn about your child's eye disease. The questions you ask in the doctor's office will not only help you to better understand it, but will also help you to better advocate for the services you wish for your child to receive at school. I remember when I first learned that my child would have vision loss. I took an online course from Hadley School for the Blind called The Human Eye. It was very informative and it helped me to better understand the doctor during appointments and also when reading the reports I would receive after those appointments. Establish long-term relationships and have consistent contact with members of your child's educational team. Know everyone's name. Reach out for updates. There's no excuse not to these days. You can find their contact information on the school's website. As a parent, I use email because this also gives me a permanent record of contact with my child's team. Not only do I periodically send an email to say hello and ask how things are going or if there's anything I can do on my end, I also provide updates of any concerns or successes happening outside of school. I will say, as a TBI, I love when the parents of students on my caseload do this for me because the school environment is typically the only place I get to see my students function. It's important to organize your child's medical and educational records. Always, always, always obtain copies of the clinic reports from your doctor's visits and provide them to your TBI. This is so much easier to do now than it was 10 years ago with the availability of online access to digital charts. I even receive digital copies of my child's IEP. Also, progress reports and report cards. Your child's updated eye medical information is what drives the TBI's functional vision evaluation. It helps the TBI to document the trajectory of your child's acuity and other related visual issues. All of this compiled information helps to provide a comprehensive understanding of your child's visual needs at school. Save copies of everything: doctor's reports, reports from other medical consultants or specialists, correspondence between you and educational or medical agencies, copies of your child's IFSP or IEP, all of their assessment reports done at school or by private practitioners. It's also so important for us to meet with other families of blind children. I know at times this has been a lonely road for me because no one, and I mean no one else, can understand unless they are walking in the same pair of shoes. It's important to form those connections for emotional support, to share resources, to learn from others' experiences, or to share your own expertise, say with a family that's recently received a diagnosis. Well, it's been my pleasure to chat today. We've only just scratched the surface on these topics, and I found it incredibly difficult to narrow it down the way I did. I look forward to more dialogue in the future, and remember to pace yourself. Take care.
Hi, I'm Meghan Hofmeister. I'm a vision support teacher from Chester County Intermediate Unit in Pennsylvania. I began working with Nathaniel in the 2018-2019 school year when he entered 7th grade. Prior to that time, Nathaniel's team began the SET process when he was in 5th grade. Nathaniel was progressing well at that time with the Braille code and using a blend of large print and regular materials in the classroom. The SET team determined that a touchscreen laptop best suited Nathaniel's needs related to contrast, ease of navigation within the system, and options for digital enlargement and audio capabilities. During 6th grade, Nathaniel transitioned to more digital materials. When I began working with him, he was already a very capable digital student. He was able to complete all of his work on his laptop, had great organization with folders for each class, and was able to upload and share his files with his teachers independently. Along with early Braille instruction, Nathaniel learned touch typing. During 7th grade, we worked on finishing the literary Braille code and practiced native window key commands. Nathaniel's early work on typing and key commands was very important for transitioning to a screen reader. I know it can be tough to get kids to buy in sometimes when it comes to typing and early Braille skills, but we try to think of it as building a collection of tools, and the more tools you have available, the better. During 7th grade, we began monthly digital reading rate checks to monitor for changes in Nathaniel's ability to access materials. We also completed exploratory trials with a Braille note taker just to gain some exposure with this sort of device and demonstrate some of its functions. We also started learning how he could use Braille in high-level math and science courses. Around this time, we also trialed NVDA, which is a free open source download, a screen reader that is a free open source download. It did not play well with the touchscreen feature on his computer at that time. And so that was a bit of a frustration, and it wasn't a big hit, but it was at least a good chance to see what a screen reader is and how it works. At the start of 8th grade, Nathaniel's digital reading rate was on par with what we had seen in 7th grade. But in October, he experienced a rapid change in his vision and really struggled to access his materials visually. At that time, we quickly transitioned to Braille as Nathaniel's primary learning medium. We relied heavily on Braille note takers for much of this transition. We completed trial periods with 2 different models, and we're still on a trial when we quickly transitioned to virtual learning as school closed in March. Having the ability to share files digitally with Nathaniel and Nathaniel using the refreshable Braille display was so invaluable to us at that time. And we really spent the remainder of that school year kind of keeping our head above water, as I'm sure was the experience of many of us. During the summer of 2020, we were able to use our ESY time to really focus on learning the screen reader finally. So with that in place, as Nathaniel transitioned to high school, he was largely able to pick and choose between digital Braille materials and the screen reader for the bulk of his work in 9th grade. Nathaniel's transition from print to digital materials to Braille and screen reader is a credit to his resilience and determination to do his best, no matter what tool he needs to pull out of his tool belt. I believe that his confidence in his Braille skills and his comfort level with typing and key commands and his general understanding of digital organization and tech problem solving, as those opportunities tend to pop up, were all invaluable in easing these major transitions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share. I look forward to joining the Q&A for any additional questions, and I hope everyone has a great day.